Welcome everyone. We'll just give a minute or two to allow everyone in. Right, I'm going to get kick-started because I know we've got lots and lots to get through today. Hi everyone, my name is Holly. I'm the MD of BIMA. Welcome to BIMA's third and audience with since lockdown. We're really excited today to welcome back Nell Watson. Nell joined us for our inaugural conference last September. She actually closed the conference and literally just blew everyone's minds. So nothing to live up to today or anything, but it was absolutely fantastic, and we're really excited to have her back, to welcome her back. So before I hand over to Pete, who's going to host today, I just wanted to give those of you on this session that maybe aren't as familiar with BIMA as many of our members, a little bit about us. So BIMA is over 35 years old. We're a not-for-profit, and we represent UK's biggest digital community. So we're really about digital talent wherever it is, whether that's agencies, tech companies, startups, brands, charities, universities, and everywhere in between. And everything we do is around driving innovation. So that's really, our absolute focus. So whether that's, going out to talk to secondary schools all around the UK about the opportunities that the digital industry has, whether that's learning and development opportunities for people in industry, or driving thought leadership. It's all comes under that kind of innovation, bringing everyone with us to make sure we have a better, more diverse, more sustainable, more successful industry in the future. So if you are interested, if you'd like to become a member, if you'd like to get involved, all of those good things, you can give me a shout. I'm on hollyhall@bima.co.uk. You can LinkedIn, you can Twitter, you can do all of those things, but we'd love to hear from you. So we have a friend, an old friend of BIMA's in Pete Trainor, here today to help host and navigate. You've got some questions, and I think we've also got, we're welcoming questions from all of you as well. So Pete, up to last year, was our incredibly successful chair of our AI Council. Unfortunately, he left us for a totally different industry, and to be CEO of Vala Health, so online healthcare, just a couple of months before this pandemic hit. So you've had an interesting experience over the last few months, I'm sure. But yeah, without further ado, let me hand over to Pete.
Thank you, Holly. Yeah, it's been a bit busy. I'm ready to come back to the old industry. Okay, I mean, what an absolute joy. I've got two introductions to Nell, like my own personal introduction, and I've got the official introduction. I don't know if Nell knows this, but probably 3 or 4 years ago, Julian Hurst, who's a friend of BIMA, organised a conference called UCD, and we helped him curate this amazing conference. And he said, we're going to get this lady called Nell Watson in to do one of our talks. It was really quite a moment. And as the curator of a conference, what you do is you kind of sit back and you're half listening to the speakers and you're half kind of waiting for the next speaker and coordinating everybody. And Nell started speaking and everybody stopped, and we just turned around and we were like, whoa, like, who is this lady? This is incredible. Talking about artificial slugs and all kinds of like just totally amazing things. Just totally blew my mind. And then, you know, I saw Nell again at South by Southwest a few years later, and she's just an astonishing mind, an absolutely astonishing mind. And so I am a bit of a fan. So this is kind of a really humbling and amazing opportunity to interview her. Okay, Nell Watson, she's an engineer, an entrepreneur, futurist thinker, grew up in Northern Ireland. She's got a long-standing interest in the philosophy of technology and how kind of extensions of human capacity drive emerging social trends. And as a machine intelligence researcher, she helped to pioneer deep machine vision at a company, QuantaCorp, which enabled fast and accurate body measurements from just 2 photos. I think it's fair to say that she's had an unusual career, including, you know, teaching postgraduate computer science at the age of 24. She's co-founded a successful graffiti artists company, which again blows my mind. But what I've really always admired about Nell is her ability to bridge the world of technology and humanities. She's made complex topics incredibly approachable to many, and her ability to translate those complex subjects into clearly understandable, digestible content, I think is really second to none in the industry, in my view. So Nell, thank you for joining us. Welcome.
Thank you.
How are you coping? How's lockdown treating you?
Well, Pete, I'm enjoying the rest simply because I used to travel such a great deal, and now I don't. And actually, it's been good for my health to not have all of the hustle and bustle, and to have a little more time to smell the roses, even if they're only the ones in my back garden. Which has been great. I think it's been very healthy. I think even a lot of tutors that I'm aware of are actually realizing that their students are a lot more on the ball, like they're a lot sharper. And it seems as if having a little more time to sleep, not needing to get up and join the rat race commute to get somewhere and then get home, but leaves people a little more energy and a little more space to think, as well as, of course, to go out and get some exercise if they like. You know, you don't come home exhausted so much after a long day. And so I think some aspects of the whole lockdown experience are, well, refreshing in a sense.
I noticed a couple of weeks ago when they were, you know, there were more people going out and the aeroplanes were starting to appear again and things that, I don't know, I kind of got almost like a bit of a kind of Stockholm syndrome. I was going, oh, it's going to be over soon, maybe. Who knows? Kind of longing for it to hang around for a bit longer.
Be careful what you wish for.
Yeah, well, exactly. You know, you do. Look, we're going to touch on lockdown a little bit in the second part of my questions. I've got 3 parts that we want to kind of crack through. And when we discussed the kind of questions that you know I would like to ask you, I really focused them on kind of the past, the present, and the future. So we're going to kind of get maybe to lockdown and what and COVID and coronavirus and what it potentially means for the future, kind of in the middle part of my questioning. But I'm just going to dive straight in. I'm really interested to get your point of view on this. Like, fascinated, in fact. I think, you know, one of the things that I'd spotted over the last few years is this risk of kind of overhyped artificial intelligence, and the sort of the danger of trying to put too much stock and hype in this technology that frankly is still emerging, it's still kind of growing. And I think what I spotted is in the early days of the pandemic, when people were really eager for quick solutions, they didn't find them. And in fact, we then ended up going back to kind of, you know, more human-to-human contact and more kind of reliance on kind of more human. Do you think, you know, has AI been overhyped over the last kind of 15 years? And did the outbreak of COVID in Wuhan really kind of expose that?
I think AI is, from my perspective, mostly doing okay, and mostly responding to our general expectations. But it probably doesn't seem like it is. It probably seems a bit disappointing because what we consider to be AI has changed. It's a tool, But as soon as we start to integrate it into our life, it ceases to be AI. We just think of it as a tool, as something we do. We don't think about your map application on your phone and all of the crazy algorithms that go into the decision of how to route you across the city, whether it's, you know, based on real-time traffic information, based on the weather, all of these different factors coming together. And so there's sometimes a tendency to think, well, where's the AI? You know, I don't see it, but it's simply become so embedded into everything and kind of below the surface, so we don't always notice it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, AI has been very successful in things like robotic process automation within businesses, taking, you know, paper documents and scrubbing the data off of those so that it can be used for actionable insights, predictions, things like that. And I think in those areas, it's been very successful. But of course, that's, you know, deep in business. That's not always something that is top of mind to most people. But I think there are a few disappointments as well, certainly. I think we're starting to learn that autonomous vehicles are a little bit tricky. It's not so much the driving on the highway, it's the unbelievable amount of potential edge cases. So weird situations, like we've had a reflective, shiny chrome truck that autonomous vehicles have not seen as being a truck, for example. And that, of course, pulls out across a highway and the car ends up T-boning it and killing the driver. I think it's going to take a while until we can start to make sense of those edge cases. And it's not even so much a processing issue. It's simply, I think there's a missing link between where we are now and where we want to get to, which is a little bit about bringing some reasoning into these technologies.
Yeah.
Because at the moment, they're still pretty much a statistical prediction engine. And there's no real way of making reasoning about the world or understanding the relation between things in a symbolic way. And I think that's probably the missing expansion pack that we need in order to make those kinds of technologies accessible and working for everyone.
Yeah, I mean, fascinating. You touched on autonomous vehicles. I'm still seeing bin men and delivery men having to do their jobs. If we'd cracked on and got the autonomous vehicles thing sorted out, we might have got, you know, saved a few lives there. I mean, AI has obviously been, and machine intelligence has been used kind of searching for new molecules that have been capable of treating COVID-19. That's obviously happening. Scanning through lung CTs for signs of COVID-related pneumonia. So it's kind of there, it is happening. But I think like what I felt was that certainly in the community, the AI and sort of machine intelligence community, or probably the fans of it rather than the scientists in it, there was a lot of, why didn't you predict this? Like, why didn't we kind of, why don't we stop this from happening? Or why didn't we kind of contain this? Why didn't we predict that something's happening? It kind of, I think it really exposed kind of just actually human frailty is the thing that's kind of, you know, AI is not going to save us from ourselves. You know what I mean? Like, it's not going to save us from that.
Yes. I mean, that pandemic would hit, and that it would be a bad one, and that it would probably be a coronavirus, not unlike SARS and MERS, which have emerged in the last 20 years. I mean, that's kind of an accident waiting to happen. It was very likely to happen at some point. And so that's not really a black swan event. That's kind of a, you know, an inevitable sword of Damocles that's going to fall on your head. You just know it by the way that the thread is starting to fray. But I think what has surprised the world is a couple of things. One is the initial acrasia, which is a philosophical term, which is, it means when you're not acting in your best interests. It's a little bit like procrastination, but it's kind of like when the rational part of your brain knows that you probably should be doing something and yet you don't do it, right? You know you have to get up in the morning and do something important, but you're still awake at 2:30 a.m. On your device. That's a bit of a craze, yeah. And I think that a lot of governments, particularly in the West, faced this emerging scenario, which was quite clear by mid to late January would be quite a bad situation. And there didn't seem to be much movement or much fire being lit under people's butts to go and sort out the situation until it became very bad. And I think that's one thing that people didn't predict. And I also think that there were already a lot of supply issues of PPE, because PPE that was supposed to be sent from Asia didn't arrive. Basically, the ships got turned around. Come on back, we need that. And all around the world, people bought up PPE and sometimes sent it off to Asia. And so that created a local lack of supply as well. And so this kind of mixture of not preparing beforehand, not taking action when we needed to, and then suddenly finding that all the local PPE had disappeared. I think those elements combined to make this event a genuine crisis instead of simply, something troublesome that can be kind of taken care of with a bit of effort, like we've seen in say Taiwan, where they've had quite a sticky situation, but they've managed to take such good care of it at an early stage.
Yeah, but it sort of strikes me that maybe the West has brought a bit too much emotion into it, maybe, and actually a bit more machine intervention possibly could have stopped some of the stupid decisions by making it a bit more statistical. You just said something that actually I find really fascinating, and we talked a little bit about this last week when we were discussing kind of topics for today. Kind of on a pure economics level, I was really fascinated last week when you were suggesting that some of the world's biggest companies basically are on the brink of collapse now because of the lockdown and the lack of preparedness for something like this. Do you think digital transformation might actually get a shot in the arm because of the COVID situation? And has this been a warning to those businesses that perhaps weren't prepared, that actually technology needs to be done kind of quicker, better, faster, harder, like now, so they don't go out of business next time?
I think certainly there are a number of issues why certain large companies are facing such imminent danger. One of which is simply a problem of lack of human foresight and greed, which is stock buybacks. But a lot of American, in particular airline companies, but globally as well, spent between 30 to 40% of their cash flow on stock buybacks, rather than investing in a kind of slush fund for when this sort of situation might arise, which was, very naughty on the part of the executives, whose compensation is of course tied to the stock price. But I think a lot of companies have embraced this digital transformation, which is great. Recently we've had banks wondering whether an electronic signature is valid and whether we should accept it, for example, or whether a business meeting absolutely needs to be in person or not. And of course, those questions are now kind of, off the table because of simple necessity. But I think that digital transformation is a lot more complex than just, getting people to sit in Zoom channels. I think it involves a new way of understanding how data flows around an organization. And that's not just between systems, but also between people, between departments, etc. And being able to model that and being able to turn tacit information, sort of hidden things that are, everybody knows, but isn't necessarily written down somewhere, and to make that data useful and actionable in a way that you can put into a system, ideally a machine learning system. So there's still plenty of opportunities to truly embrace this. But I think it's really amusing how the future has come back to meet us in the present. And yet also life is paradoxically faster and also slower. because of the situation. You know, we're taking a little more time with our families. We're maybe spending a little more time to slowly cook and slowly savor a meal and spend time with our pets. But at the same time, in business life, the crunch is on to change how our companies operate, to find ourselves in a world where maybe our products no longer fit the market, right? Something's gone wrong. Maybe your customer is no longer interested, or maybe the channel has completely gone. And so a lot of companies now are having to scramble to re-find that product market fit, that blend of getting that dog that wants to eat the dog food, right?
Yeah, that's
how do you locate that? How do you get to them? And so a lot of large companies are now having to think like startups. They're having to literally go back to the business model canvas and figure out who is their customer and what are they providing to them, as well as what their core competences are. What are they already good at and not good at? And how does that relate to this? And those are very complex issues, especially in a corporation where you've got a lot of people, a lot of overhead, a lot of technical debt in your existing systems, and that it's not easy to move with those or reconfigure them. And so, yeah, these are very difficult times, but there are always opportunities as well in every crisis.
Yeah. So, I mean, fascinating. We could talk for an hour just on this, but we're not going to. We're going to move forward. But, you know, even like I keep saying to people, when was the last time you got cash out? And I don't mean like in the last 10 weeks or something. It's probably gone now, isn't it? I mean, I don't know. Are we going to go back to cash? I can't see it happening because
I think so.
Tap and go. It's just fascinating that this is kind of almost a razor moment for so many like antiquated ideas. Is there kind of an application of technology that you've seen that's really kind of been the most promising from your perspective in terms of kind of machine intelligence that's being used to tackle COVID and coronavirus? Like, have you seen anything that's kind of, you know, really made you lean forward and go, there you go, that's what it's for?
Well, you mentioned engineering molecules, which I think is actually a fantastic way to use machine learning. And even more than just thinking about it in silicon, you can actually create what's called a self-driving lab, where you basically generate a compound or, you know, a chemical blend of molecules, or maybe an alloy of different metals or some kind of mix. And then you can extrude that using something akin to a 3D printer, and then automatically start doing physical tests on it. So what is the actual ductility of this metal at a certain temperature? Is it brittle? Will it dissolve? What kind of acid will it accept before it begins to break down? These kinds of things. And so you can use this for all kinds of different material science processes, whether that's materials used within medicine, or whether it's within construction or consumer products, you know, new kinds of glass, etc. So I think there's tremendous opportunities there that will have an effect on the physical world and the world of stuff that we are only beginning to glimpse the future of. That's going to be a big deal. I think for COVID itself directly, we have a tremendous unmet opportunity within making sense of things like heartbeat sensors. Many of us have smartwatches that track our heartbeat, for example. Some of those even include a pulse oximeter, which is able to analyze the oxygen flowing in your blood using a little LED. That's a little device that you can plug in your finger, you know, for 10 or 20 pounds, which is very useful in these times when there's a sort of a happy hypoxia symptom, we call it, where people may feel more or less fine, but they are gradually becoming less and less able to move oxygen around the body for reasons that we're still beginning to figure out, but we're not quite entirely sure. But imagine if you could use, for example, a heartbeat sensor to locate what is called a febrile signature. That is a signature that somebody has in their heart, a tiny little change. And so even before somebody develops a fever, or even before they develop other symptoms, we could use machine learning to detect that signature that tells you, watch out. We'll give you a little engine warning light, right? Watch out, we've detected that you may start to come down with some sort of an infection, and that you should probably already start isolating yourself from other people. And I think that that could be a game changer, even more than contact tracing apps, etc., which have a lot of variables and a lot of difficulty in trying to figure out the actual risk of meeting somebody, right? If you were 2 meters from somebody on the street and it was outside, you know, and it wasn't windy that day, is that risky? Probably not. You know, but you were sitting behind glass and somebody walked past you on the other side of that glass. How does the system know that?
Yeah, that is a very good point. I was thinking about this the other day, actually. That is a good point. They've not thought about that.
Yeah, you know, even if you're living in an apartment or a semi-detached house, and the person in the next house gets sick, but you know, there's a wall between you. Yes, you may have spent 8 hours on the opposite side of that wall when you went to sleep, but you know, your risk of infection isn't necessarily any higher. And so I think a lot of these apps are going to face a lot of technical challenges. And so maybe one of the best ways we could move forward is if we can indeed use machine learning to isolate that febrile signature. So then, you know, everybody can have some sort of a cheap heart rate sensor. We can, you know, give them one, and that can maybe help to locate infection before anyone actually is at any risk of infecting other people.
Yeah, brilliant. I was kicking around the idea for a while, and kind of one of the reasons that the Vala job was really fascinating to me. Like, I've been kicking around this idea of, you know, like hallucinogenic technology for so long now. This concept of, you know, finding the cause, not treating the condition, like just makes so much sense. You know, like functionally, you go downstream and find what causes something. Don't wait for it to go wrong. Like, and what you're saying is exactly that, and it's an amazing idea. I am also really fascinated. Is it Sweden where they're going mad for embedding chips? Is I think one of the Scandinavian countries, they're going all in on kind of microchip embedding and stuff like that, embeddables. So, I mean, look, I think something else that's really, and it's interesting you mentioned contact tracing, because it's getting me thinking quite a lot. And I know you're, you know, a philosopher about these things as well. You know, just because we're in a pandemic, it doesn't mean that some of AI's greatest challenges, like accuracy and bias and the risk of kind of exacerbating surveillance, have gone away. In fact, it's probably highlighting those problems more now. Do you think people need to question whether the company's touting this kind of technology? I'll give you an example, like Google and Apple teaming up to do the contact tracing stuff that we almost bought into in this country. Do you think people still need to be really cautious about that? Or are we in a situation right now where we've kind of got no choice? We just got to let them do the big tech stuff that they need to do to keep us safe?
That's a very interesting question. I'm actually doing some work with the IEEE. It's going to be Creative Commons open access, so it's going to get released for everyone to use. But it's essentially trying to figure out the rules for how these apps are developed and how they are deployed, and to make sure that we respect people's privacy as much as possible, as well as being radically transparent. So making it very clear how these systems operate, what they're doing, the limits that they have, the boundaries, how capable they are in terms of performance, you know, with, you know, how many false positives, false negatives, etc. and whether there is human influence in these things, as well as an ability to basically clarify something, to say, actually, no, I wasn't at that location, or no, you've misunderstood something. There wasn't, in fact, a whole plate of glass between myself and that person, and there was no airflow. And so, your system is mistaken, which is something very important. I think governments have a big job of convincing people that the app is safe. Not only that it gives actionable, useful information, especially if you are maybe gonna not take a trip or avoid going to work for 2 or 3 weeks, or put your loved ones at risk or not. You want to make sure that information is correct and genuinely actionable. But also there is a potential risk of such apps being used for risk classification of people, or for some sort of a social credit system by the back door, right? Because we determined that you happen to hang out at a betting shop for 2 hours this week, and so we think, well, that probably makes you less trustworthy with money or something like that. And we must not let anything like that occur. We also must try to make things as secure as possible, to make it difficult for bad actors, whether they are criminals or even state actors, getting access to that information, as well as ensuring that no data can be cross-correlated. It's basically when you have some data which has been cleaned or anonymized, but you have some other information that you can cross-reference that with, and then suddenly that information loses its anonymity, right? For example, if you live in a country and there aren't that many people in your postcode with your age, your gender, etc., then it could be quite easy to locate who you are, right? Or you could make an inference about somebody by understanding, for example, if somebody buys a certain hair care product, then their ethnicity is likely to be one thing or another, right? You can make all of these kinds of inferences. And so I think these apps have some value. If they're done well, they can have a great deal of value. But we need to hold people accountable, and we need to have a lot of citizen engagement in how these things are rolled out, especially because if one country gets it really wrong, then it will really erode trust in all other nations as well. And so we have to watch our peers, watch our peer citizens, watch our peer states, and try to make sure that everybody is doing their utmost to do this in the most proper and safe and secure way.
Well, I mean, especially as we're going to have to kind of, quote unquote, rush these things out. Yes. That's when I've got to stand on the side of humanity, as much as I can, and say that I don't think anyone's going to, there are obviously going to be nefarious uses of this kind of technology, but generally people are just kind of trying to keep us safe, I think. But it's the things that they miss because they're rushing it out that's going to be a problem. So it was kind of, when somebody was saying to me the other day, oh, why don't we just get the vaccine sorted? You go, well, it takes 2 years of trials to make sure that, bits don't explode and fall off. But we don't have the same rigor with a piece of tracing technology, even if it's kind of on the edge, we just get it out there because we want to keep people safe. But so there's definitely some scrutiny in some of this missing, I think, and it's going to be human error that causes these problems potentially more than in our country anyway, I hope, like nefarious use. I'm kind of always on the side of the human in these equations. Anybody that knows me knows that. But I also understand it that I also started to understand when I had the AI business that there are kind of no fundamentally impossible tasks. So what I mean by that is just everything possibly has a conclusion. Do you think it's worth us approaching the future with a kind of skeptical, informed take rather than just taking this idea of, oh, AI can do it? Are we scratching the surface on what this technology can do? Or do you think there's a lot of technology just ready to take over right now?
I think there have been a lot of surprises in just how far we can optimize the efficiency of algorithms. Sounds a bit boring, but to be honest, that's making a huge difference, because our ability to optimize things is far faster in terms of, you know, increasing ability to optimize things than actually, you know, Moore's law of, you know, processors getting more efficient, etc. This is actually a problem within the world of quantum computing, because people keep coming up with quantum computers and very, very clever quantum algorithms to run on them to do very, very difficult tasks, you know, trying to make sense of weather formations and things. And then somebody comes along with a classical, regular kind of algorithm that does it just as quickly using regular hardware. And, you know, it's like, drat, you know, everyone in the world of quantum is like, no, you know, because it means that, you know, this beautiful use case that you think you found for the technology simply can be outcompeted because somebody's invented a more efficient algorithm. And so this is why I think that a lot of people are going to be surprised or continue to be surprised by the pace of development of AI, with the caveat that until we get some kind of symbolic reasoning built into AI, it's never quite going to have anything akin to common sense. Which is something that's so sorely lacking in the systems today.
Yeah, that's it. I mean, even the work that I used to do a lot of work with the business in my old business in kind of mental health and trying to help charities optimize processes for, you know, mental health and things like that. And there was so much kind of pressure. Oh, just let the algorithms, let the bots talk to the people. And you're like, no, there's no empathy in it. Like, it's not there to do that. It's there to make things more efficient, but it doesn't sympathize. It can't empathize. It's good for, you know, rational things, but not irrational things. Go on then. I'm really curious, as a kind of slight shift, what industries are really going to benefit from the current situation? And do you think there are any industries that are just going to disappear completely because of all of this at the moment?
Depends how quickly things start to ease, but I think, you know, movie theaters might be hit very, very hard, as well as, of course, traditional art theaters, you know, operas, plays, pantomimes, etc. That's going to be very difficult, especially because, you know, they're big, you know, expensive buildings on big sites. Similarly with sports, at least with sports, you can broadcast the match, even if there's not people going, whoa, you know. And actually there's some folks working on trying to use machine learning to create a virtual crowd that you can kind of paste into the seats, which, you know, cheers and whoops and stuff at the appropriate moments, you know, being trained on previous matches. Yeah, which I think is quite an interesting use case for AI. I wonder how well it will work. I imagine it will work reasonably well, but not brilliantly. That's the story of AI. It's reasonably well, but not brilliantly. But
I read somewhere about a German football club that have basically got all of their season ticket holders to effectively buy or rent a dummy that they were going to put in their seat, and they were all in these like Home Alone style like pulley systems. They were going to wave and cheer and things like that. So that's a kind of analog version of what you just said. But, but also, like, sorry to interrupt you, because I'm a football fan. I've got season tickets. I go to the football with my son, and actually, a lot of it is about the energy and the release, and, you know, when that crowd are like roaring into the sports people, or even when you're at the cinema or in the theatre, it's that laughter that gets the actors acting harder or the players playing better. Like, it's that palpable part of it that's going to go. But I mean, that's tragic, isn't it? It's kind of a big dent in culture in terms of, if we start using technology to replace people in crowds, that's, I don't know, it's quite tragic, really.
It is a little bit, yeah. I think there are some experiments with trying to watch a live performance with lots of other people at the same time to try to get a little bit more of that crowd gestalt experience of like everybody's into something. But I don't know how well it can work through a screen, or if, you know, somebody's got you know, their dog needs feeding, or you know, I don't know. It remains to be seen how well that's going to work.
I guess the other problem is that, you know, the minute everything's done through bits of glass, you're no longer a captive audience, because you can literally just walk away or turn it off.
Indeed, yes.
Yeah, right. It's kind of, anyway, that's quite, I don't know. That's all the stuff that's making me a bit kind of longing for normality. I don't like this idea of a new normal. I quite like the old normal for some of these things. I was actually really fascinated to hear where you think all this is going to lead companies. Do you think, I mean, what's for the future, where do you think it's going to lead sort of industries? You've touched on it a little bit, but I think there's a bit more in there.
Sure. I think there's huge opportunities in training, especially if you can make training faster. For example, you know, a lot of airlines have just let go of, say, 25% of their staff, right? You know, and that's quite a it's quite a challenging career physically and mentally as well, because, you know, you never know when a crisis may happen. You have to be alert. There's often long hours, and you're not even necessarily being paid if you're not in the sky. But people will need to figure out what next, right? And how can my skills that I've developed in different aspects of my career, how can I apply those to a new role, right? What are my transferable skills? And I think that there's a massive unmet need there when people suddenly find themselves thinking, what next? You know, if I'm an, you know, air steward, you know, how do I apply those skills to something else? You know, what else would I be good at? You know, which are a number of things, but you have to find those. And also, I think that because there's a desire to speed up training, I think there's a huge opportunity in using VR for education, specifically because a lot of learning involves a loop. It involves doing something and then seeing the reaction, right? So if it's just throwing a basketball at a hoop, you get quite fast reaction about whether something worked or didn't, right? And then you kind of iterate from that. You change your stance, you put a little more energy or whatever. And gradually over time, your brain learns how to get to that goal, just like a reinforcement learning AI. And I think that in a world of VR, you can close the learning loop a lot faster. Because if you're trying to learn how to throw a frisbee or how to tee off on a golf course, you have to physically chase after a bunch of things and bring them back before you can start learning again. But in a VR environment, you can speed up these learning cycles a lot faster, you know, engaging with customers, virtual customers, etc. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity there, which hasn't yet to be exploited. And in fact, that may end up being virtual reality's first killer app, actually, is in education.
Interesting. That's really fascinating. Wow, especially as somebody that's trying to run a business and homeschool children, like I am not winning any Ofsted. So if I could stick a headset on them and let homeschooling be done by avatar, that would be great. Which, incidentally, it would be stupid of me not to drag you into the trenches on some of your futurism type thinking, right? You touched on last week when we were having this chat about today, this concept of the avatar workforce. And that made me, I was thinking about that like for the rest of the day. Like to a lot of people, this is probably going to sound like pure science fiction, but, you know, I know surgeons that use VR for, you know, surgery, and I know surgeons that are already kind of 3D printing and talking through things on the International Space Station and things like that. So tell everybody about this concept of the avatar workforce, because this is brilliantly bonkers.
It is. I happen to have been asked to judge a competition for $10 million. sponsored by All Nippon Airways in Japan. And it's the Avatar X Prize, the ANA Avatar X Prize. And basically it's a competition to create the best avatar robot. So I think most people are familiar with Avatar, the movie, right? Where the, the character inhabits a sort of 12-foot tall virtual blue being. But imagine that, but instead of a biological being, it's a robot, right? So we're making immense progress in these areas. And I'm kind of astounded at the level of progress that there is so far, and just how close to market a lot of these technologies are. I wouldn't have realized this myself just a few years ago. We're coming to an age where it's going to be possible to strap on a VR headset and basically take command of a robot somewhere else out in the world and explore the world, with relatively natural movements and being able to handle things and push buttons, etc. And basically to have this robot as your avatar that you can then go out into the world and even do physical work with, do physical labor with. And it means that somebody can be in one country, but actually telecommute their virtual presence to another country, right? So you can have somebody in Honduras who telecommutes to a factory in France, right? And I think that this is a strange new level of offshoring of services that we are going to be seeing in the next couple of years.
In the next couple of years?
I would say in the next, say 5 years or so, we're going to start seeing these technologies start to really hit the mainstream. I mean, we're already seeing a lot of workers in countries all around the world are controlling these little delivery robots, right? Now, they're not controlling it the whole way. It is more or less doing its thing, but when it gets into a little bit of trouble or confusion, a human can step in and help to guide or negotiate a situation. And the way that the human is actually assisting that robot then enables the machine learning system to know better, right? It's starting to learn about the world. It's starting to know what to do if it encounters that situation next time. And so actually by inhabiting a robot and operating that robot as if you were more or less doing your normal routines, this is a way for machine learning to become embodied, right? It can hitch a ride on our shoulder and learn about the world through our own virtual eyes, and thereby have a much greater understanding of, how to hold an umbrella, how to hold a bottle and pour somebody a glass of water, something that machines find incredibly difficult at the moment. But by being able to observe and at the same time watch what people are doing, operating through a machine, kind of like a ventriloquist almost. This is how machines are going to start to get these huge data sets, these sets of virtual experiences about how the world works. And so I think actually once avatars start to really hit the business ecosystem, that's actually going to then lead to another rapid takeoff in AI because of those data sets.
Just amazing. I mean, like genuinely, it hadn't really struck me how close we were to some of these concepts as well. Like you take it for granted, it puts human in the loop, kind of the concept of human in the loop and training machines, the trial and error with people, like on a whole other level. The other thing that really fascinates me about that as well, and my first reaction, I'm sure a lot of people's first reaction is like, taking jobs away, or it's only one step away from robotic workforces or whatever. But the thing that really excites me is that concept right there could give people with disability like a level playing field to go out to work, like to go do things that for centuries they've been unable to do. I think that concept right there is so powerful as a way of leveling things a little bit. Yeah, it's brilliant. And actually, the other thing that struck me the other day as I was sitting on the sofa over there playing Fortnite with my 10-year-old son is we all put on an avatar and run around virtual environments for entertainment anyway. Like, that's what we've been doing for decades. So it's kind of an extension of that.
Exactly.
I want to get to some of these questions in a minute, right? I've got one question that I want to ask you, and I'm going to go on to some kind of the audience. In your view, as a philosophical futurist thinker, like, has the present fundamentally reshaped what tomorrow was going to look like? Do you think it was inevitable that these huge natural disasters, these kind of black swan events, would happen? And as a species, we just, like, is it inevitable? Are we just going to go back to this concept of a new normal? Are we going to go back to normal, or this new normal? Or do you think like everything has completely changed because of the last sort of 6 or 7 months?
I think that this is probably a threshold, a watershed moment in the history of humanity. I think, yes, we will have, of course, mass gatherings again for sports matches, etc., in a few years. But I think that the idea of just showing up to your office and, as long as your jacket is on that chair, you're working.
Yeah.
I think there's been kind of a long con going on between employers and employees. Like employers have wanted to have the people in the room because, as long as they're in the room, they're probably doing something, and people have said, well, okay, yeah, I'll be in your room. I'm not necessarily, being terribly productive, right? And that's been a difficult shift for employers to not necessarily know if somebody is doing their work that moment or not. It's kind of an extension of trust. It's a bit of a leap of faith. But at the same time, it's actually very liberating for people, because when you manage by objectives, then you enable people to do what they need to do in their own time, the best way that suits them, right? For some people, their most creative hours might be at 2 a.m., which isn't good for a 9 to 5. But if that works for you, then go for it. If you're delivering the results, then that's probably fine. I think that the age of the big office is probably over. The big open plan office, definitely over.
Which is what we all craved. Open plan. Get rid of offices.
Joy, right?
Yeah.
I think we'll go back to kind of like hot desking with meeting space. Definitely companies will want to meet up once or twice a week.
Yeah.
But I get the feeling that most employees will not want to spend 5 days a week at the office any longer.
Yeah, definitely.
And as employers start to understand the savings and costs, as well as the potential increases in productivity, they'll probably think that that's okay as well. And so I think that's going to be a lasting change. I also think that we will indeed travel less to show up at events, for example, whether that's speaking or whether that's participating through the audience or whatever. I think online is here to stay. And especially as in the coming years, as we start to see more of these avatar type systems take the fold, that's going to change things. People will travel less. And, on balance, that'll probably be better for the health of the planet and for many people's health as well.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I've certainly enjoyed having less aeroplanes buzzing overhead. I'm starting to see them appear again. Yeah, amazing. Somebody, so Ben Quigley's just asked a really interesting question down here. The avatar robot scenario. Could this actually provide jobs to people in one country who may have lost their job in another? So, like, help solve the global employment challenges is the question.
Exactly. And it's there are good and not so good sides of it. I mean, there are always winners and losers, and there's always trade-offs. The good thing about these technologies is, yes, they can help people to access a more global labor market, right? They can perhaps take up an opportunity that otherwise they'd have to uproot their whole life to go and, take that opportunity and do that job. But through whether it's telecommuting by screen or whether it's by avatar, those problems are mitigated. It means that if you can't get a visa to go somewhere or a work permit, that's not necessarily the end of the world, right? It means that people may have a lot of hope for the future that they currently don't, because they think that they have no hope living where they are. But if they can potentially access labor somewhere else and then bring hard currency back to their home country where it's, that money's worth a lot more, then that kind of is a bit of a game changer. However, at the same time, during this crisis, we've seen the average wage increase by about 9%, which is a lot. But that's because the lowest paid workers have all been let go of. And so there's a tremendous inequity in who is remaining employed and who is not because of this crisis. And that's probably going to be a lasting inequity, where there's those knowledge workers who already vote with their feet if they don't like something, are even more at liberty to go and pursue opportunities that they like, and they're even more headhuntable.
Yeah.
And the greater substantial proportion of people are not. And I'm afraid that may contribute to even greater inequality in our society.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to ask this question from an anonymous attendee. An avatar, probably. It's probably somebody doesn't even exist. It's probably a robot. Countries served by females, for example, New Zealand, Germany, Kerala and India, Norway, etc., have all excelled, whereas the UK, the US, Spain have not. Will the future be led by women and at least, find some balance? I think underneath that is a truism, and it's kind of actually, has all of this started to level playing fields, or do you think, as you've just kind of alluded to, that actually we might see more inequality based on the way that it's being dealt with by certain countries? What do you think?
I hate to say it, but on the whole, I think that it's probably going to lead to greater inequality in society, especially because so many of these bailouts have been to hedge funds or companies that have spent literally maybe $5 or $10 billion on stock buybacks instead of ways to protect themselves if things go wrong, or investing in future opportunities. And that's going to create a lot of inflation. That's going to probably lead to different forms of austerity. So increased taxes and probably fewer public services. It's going to be an unfortunate sequel to the events of 2008, 2009, and probably substantially worse, I'm afraid.
Yeah.
So that's not going to be so good. Yeah. However, every cloud does have a silver lining. I think that, work will probably be more fun. We'll have more agency in our working lives, and we'll be able to enjoy life better and feel less under the thumb, or less of a serf and more of a freeman, right? More of somebody who is more at liberty to decide how they spend their time during the day. And I think once people have tasted that, they will not want to lose that again, because that's something that money can't buy. And lots of people find themselves in a gilded cage where they're getting a high salary, but they're pretty much miserable and they're really tied to their position. And so maybe we won't have as much money in our pockets, but we'll be spending more time with our friends, or at least more time with our families, and having more time to rest and enjoy life. And on the whole, maybe that's not going to be the worst trade-off ever.
Amazing. There you go. That's an optimistic way of finishing a conversation about pandemics in the future and things like that. However, I want us to know now Watson a little bit better. For, 3 very quick fire questions for you, so people can kind of understand you a bit more, the person behind the intellect, which just blows my mind. Best book you've read this year?
It is probably Interdependent Capitalism by Jun Yun and his family, Jun Yun.
Amazing. We'll put those up online. Favorite science fiction movie or adaptation?
I would say it's hard to beat 2001: Space Odyssey.
Snap. I saw that at the Barbican last year in the cinema. First time I've seen it on a big screen. It stands up. And just to finish off, what's next for you what's coming up for you in the next 12 months? What can we expect to see you breaking?
Well, I've a couple of pet projects. One is at edcsymbol.org. I'm attempting to create a hazard symbol for endocrine disruptors, which are a type of chemical which can be very disruptive to the health of living beings. So basically, they mess up your hormones, and that causes all kinds of horrible, nasty effects. So you might have heard of BPA and these chemicals like Teflon, for example, that don't break down, they don't biodegrade, and so they just kind of stay in our water supply for a long time or stay in our bodies for a long time. And so I've created a symbol, a little bit like a radiological or biological hazard, and I'm hoping to start seeing that symbol show up on products soon, so that everyone can know whether a product contains those chemicals, and enable capitalism to do its job, right? So that product makers are motivated to take these things out, so that because transparency has enabled better consumer decisions.
Amazing. Like, I was expecting you to say you were going to learn a new language or knitting or something like that, but you're not. You're creating new symbols for hazardous objects. Now, thank you so much. This has been a massive honor for me because I have been a big fan for a while. I'm super excited about kind of what comes next and what you're up to and things like that. I know there are a bunch of questions that we didn't get to, but I think we are out of time. Holly, are you around? Hello, Holly.
I am.
Thanks, Nell.
Thanks, Nell. That was fascinating. Yeah, thank you so much, and thank you, Pete. You did a great job of some good questions. So Nell has very kindly offered 30 minutes of her time over on Twitter. Her Twitter handle is @NellWatson. And I know there's going to be lots of questions about avatars. So please head over and ask her some questions, because yeah, she's dedicated the time for it. I just wanted to very briefly say that this session is available on YouTube now. So if you'd like to share it with people, then please send them over to BIMA's YouTube channel. And then very, very briefly, we have a rather topical, of course. We are working with Microsoft to present a session next week on the future of work. So hopefully we'll give you some...
We just cracked that one. We've done it. It's cracked.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll talk about avatars. And then we have our 2 next An Audience With. So we have on the 28th of May, we have Be More Pirate author Sam Conniff. And then on the 11th of June, we have Una King, who is ex-Labour MP, now VP of Diversity, Equity and Inclusion at Snap. So yeah, we're really looking forward to those 2. But thank you so much. Head over to chat to Nell on @NellWatson, and otherwise have a great evening. Thanks both. Thanks, Nell.
Thank you, folks.